About the time that Abraham was leaving Ur of the Chaldees, this amazing Mycenaean civilization was being built. The Lion Gate behind me is kind of the symbol of this ancient civilization we know so little about. But what we do know is these are descendants from the three sons of Noah that overspread the earth and took with them engineering abilities that were not matched for hundreds of years. Have you ever wondered where all these ancient civilizations with their remarkable stone architecture and all the engineering and geometric, amazing art and architecture they were able to do, where they all came from? Well, as believers, we know. You know, the Bible tells us in Genesis 9, and I'm going to read to you Genesis 9:19, the framework that we interpret all archaeology that we see. Here's what it says. I'll start in verse 18. Now the sons of Noah who went out from the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now verse 19. And these three were the sons of Noah, and from these the whole earth was populated. What's amazing when we look at ancient history, there's an explosion of building. The pyramids are unbelievable, but also the ziggurats and the step pyramids that are all over the world, in Latin America and South America and across the Stonehenges of Europe. All of these structures are amazing. How did the engineering of the ancients get so elevated that was lost? Well, if you understand the Bible, there are two views of history. There's an evolutionary view that mankind has slowly evolved upward and that the earliest humans were very dumb. But actually, that's not what the archaeological record shows us. The earliest humans we find in any of these archaeological sites were advanced, even beyond what we are able to do until maybe the 17th or 18th centuries. Unbelievably advanced. How can we understand that? Well, decide which view of history we're taking and decide whether or not we will let the scriptures give us the framework for the archaeology or allow the evolutionary view of the ascent of man to give us the interpretation of the archaeology. Let me share with you the summary of all the lessons we've done in our study here. We are in Greek. This is Mycenaean civilization. This is the Mycenae headquarters town that's here in the Peloponnese of Greece. About the time that Abraham was leaving the Ur of the Chaldees, they started moving here and building these amazing structures, and they stayed here and built until the 12th century BC. And then, as we'll see in other lessons, they just disappeared. And what we believe from history is that they became the sea peoples of the 12th century. The pharaohs of Egypt said that the sea peoples invaded them, coming from the islands of the Mediterranean. Probably the Mycenaeans and the Minoans were those people. Well, let me give you the lessons, and I have 5 of them. This is the summary of everything that we've studied so far. Number 1, God directs the events of human civilization. It was the Lord that closed them in the ark. It was the Lord that told them to stay in the ark. It was the Lord that opened the door of the ark, and Noah and his sons left the ark and overspread the earth. The first lesson is God is directing the events of civilization. Number 2, there's only one human race, men of many peoples and nations. When Paul was teaching up in Athens, he says in Acts 17 and verse 26, God has made from one blood all the nations of the earth. Actually, there's only one human race. There aren't 3 races. You know, I like it when I fill out forms. They say, what race are you? I'm looking for the one, the human race. Instead of dividing, God says there is one human race, one blood from which all humans came. And so we're actually all related. We're all one family. The third lesson that we studied is God has a purpose for every nation. If you keep reading in Genesis 9, what you find is that there was a purpose for each of these people groups. And the people groups were to be tools in the Lord's hands. The Assyrians had a part of his plan. The Babylonians had a part in his plan. The Egyptians had a major part in his plan as they hosted the children of Israel in their captivity. All of these nations are a part of God's plan. And as we look at the scope of history, we see God's master plan, especially in our lesson that we did on Daniel and the image in Daniel, and the Babylonian and the Greek and the Persian and the Roman Empire. Then we saw the next lesson that God not only directs the events of human civilization, not only is there one family of many peoples, and not only does God have a purpose, number 3, for the nations, but what's amazing is God has a message of salvation for all nations. He said that through you, Abraham, all the nations will be blessed. The plan of salvation wasn't just for Abraham, wasn't just for the Jews, it was for all the world. And we'll see that unfolding plan of salvation that Paul took to the ends of the Roman Empire and taught everywhere he went. And finally, the 5th lesson, which brings us to prophecy. God's plan surrounds Israel. Did you know that the head of gold, and then the chest of silver, and then the bronze abdomen, and then the 2 legs of iron in Daniel's statue showed the succession of the empires? But God says there are only 4 world empires until the end. Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, and Rome revived. That's going to be our lessons as we study the life and letters of Paul here in Greece, as we see where all these archaeological ruins came from, where all these civilizations came from, as the Bible gives us the framework, as we see God's plan that salvation go to all nations. The question is today, how do you interpret rocks? Do you take the view of history of evolution, the ascent of man, or do you take God's record of the descent of man? That Adam and Eve were amazingly brilliant. Their children were building cities, making musical instruments, forging brass. Amazing. God said we descended from the Garden of Eden into chaos, and this reflects some of the early amazing engineering knowledge, as opposed to what evolution teaches. By the way, the Bible is confirmed scientifically by all the flood evidence everywhere, historically by the advanced civilizations in the past that we have no idea of their knowledge where it came from. It's your choice. Which view of history do you take? I choose and teach from the view that the Word of God is true and that it gives us the framework for understanding the history that we see all around us.